This isn't the video I thought we'd be making, but we're making it anyway. Because it's always an interesting discussion if you wanted to bring up regret. You know, sometimes it eats away at you. You think you made the right choice, but then you decide later on, you realize later on, wait a minute, I messed up. And for the Montreal Canadiens on a night where they are playing off against my hometown Vancouver Canucks, of course, though, the Habs are my second favorite team, so I get a winner either way. On this day, I wanted to ask whether or not the Montreal Canadiens could be regretting this move. Was it a mistake? Because today we're talking about some news that actually did happen on March 7th, so trade deadline time, this was one of the more under-the-radar stories because, of course, on March 7th there were so many other things that people were talking about. But it comes to us in the form of the New Jersey Devils, and a contract handed out to defenseman Jonathan Kovacevic. This extension was pretty beefy, 5 years long, and an AAV of $4 million. And it's interesting, because when it comes to Jonathan Kovacevic, this is a guy whom you could say may have gotten a little bit overpaid with this deal, just based on his reputation. Hey, Kovacevic is a 27-year-old dude. July 12th, 1997 is the birth date. He's a big right-handed defenseman, but he's a guy who made his bread and butter as an NHL call-up option. He had 4 games with the Winnipeg Jets in 21-22 and eventually played in the NHL as a Canadiens D-man, not because he was amazingly fantastic, earth-shatteringly good, but because the Canadiens just kind of needed D-men. He had 77 games in his first full season in the National Hockey League, putting up 15 points in the process, and the year after, he had 13 points in 62 games played. Mind you, he's 27 now, so these 2 seasons happened at 25 and 26 years old. The guy was a late bloomer who made the NHL, and was more or less just a normal, average, not too significant D-man on the Habs blue line. Even now, you can say, the guy's on pace for 20 points on the year, which is alright, 16 points in 65 games played as of right now for the Devils, but on his last contract, he's making $766,000. Is this guy really worthy of a $4 million AAV deal for 5 years? Look at that jump from $700K to $4 million. Is it worth it? Is this the right contract for this guy? And ultimately, the question lies into some of the responses from this thread, because it was posted about by TSN, Kovacevic has re-signed with the Devils, and then you had this tweet made by Habs Fans TV Sports. Fantastic channel, by the way. The folks that do the mini-stick interviews on the street, yeah, they've got some great content. But they went out there and asked, did anyone get over the fact that the Montreal Canadiens traded this guy for a 4th-round pick, and now he's on a $20 million contract as a top 4D on a playoff team? And that is a really big eye-opener. Head over to Kovacevic and his game log. He's getting 21, 23, 21, 24-minute games in there. He is being utilized, and especially with the absence to Dougie Hamilton and some of the other guys that have been rotating around in the New Jersey Devils decor. I mean, Kovacevic is a solid top 4 guy. He's been utilized, he's been played, and now with some of these extra injuries, no more Siegenthaler, no more Dougie Hamilton, you kind of need these players to step up. Kovacevic stepped up so much that he got himself a $4 million AAV contract. What gives? Let's go back over onto this tweet and read some of the responses here. My own personal view from HFTV, Covey was always going to be better than Barron and Harris, and the Habs could have kept him on a way better contract or gotten more than a 4th-round pick. Also, huge congrats to Kovacevic the guy, from the AHL to waivers to a 560 to a top 4 to lifetime financial security. That is unbelievable. And that, of course, is a super underrated aspect of this conversation, too. This guy was an NHL tweener just 3 years ago, and now he's a top 4D? In New Jersey, of all places, securing a $20 million contract? That's absolute baller stuff right there. Big fantastic congrats over to Kovacevic. A reply goes out there and says, I'm over it. He wasn't that here in Montreal, and he was the odd man out. Players are going to flourish on other teams when you have an elite development team. I'm glad he took advantage of it somewhere else. He isn't a top 4 D-man. The contract is also an overpay. Some of the responses are going out there and challenging that. It depends with the cap going up. That money for a number 5 that can kill penalties is pretty fair. You also had this tweet made by Max. We need to have a serious conversation about why the Montreal Canadiens kept David Savard over Jonathan Kovacevic. And then, devil's advocate, if we have that conversation, can we talk about how the team angling to pay Neil Pionk $7 million a season let Kovacevic go to waivers and still lets their management make decisions? Yes, Max says. Now, just to wrap things up on this conversation, because the question's already out there, do the Montreal Canadiens regret letting Kovacevic go for a 4th-round pick? Was this a mistake to let this guy go? We're going over onto the Habs subreddit because 3 months ago, before Kovacevic signed the contract that he's on right now, this question was asked by SKQC99, do the Habs miss Kovacevic? And I think Hughes was basically forced to trade him. Quebec No Deeks goes out there and says, without him and Harris, we had 6 defensemen, and he knew Hudson didn't need Laval. I think the problem is fundamentally on the offense and their play in both zones. Kovacevic might have saved a couple of goals, but we'd still be at the bottom of the Atlantic. I guess Kent Hughes chose to give Barron another year of evaluation. Another reply goes out there and says, this team is not one Jonathan Kovacevic away from being good. Can we move on from Kovacevic? This team would have had the exact same record with him in the lineup. I like him. He was solid. Unfortunately, he's not a part of the future, and we had to let him go. I wish he had another season with us. Now, just to shift a little bit of gears here, let's end this video off by going on to the New Jersey Devils subreddit, because they did post about the Kovacevic contract, 5 years, $20 million total, so $4 million AAV. The R Devils folks goes out there and talks about this. Max181 says this is totally reasonable with where the cap is. $7 million is the new $5 million, $4 million is the new 2.5, pretty much on line with everything else. People can hate on Coves all they want, but he's been consistent and has had a good head for the game. Oli Oxygen Free goes out there and says, this is his 10-game moving average. The red line denotes where Siegenthaler got hurt. This is when Kovacevic received a contract for what he did in the first half of this chart. We'll see if he can get back to that level with or without Siegenthaler. And included is a really interesting chart here, so you can see that the moving average score for Kovacevic, he did start to improve a little bit and become more useful once Siegenthaler ended up losing his spot in the lineup and getting hurt. So maybe steadily declining, but then significantly improving. That's the profile we're seeing here out of Kovacevic. I'm not really too sure how to interpret that, honestly, but the commenter is going out there and saying this is a good thing. That being said, though, what he has achieved this year is extremely impressive defensively. He is top 90th percentile in the NHL for defensive goals against and expected goals against. So that, of course, is very positive for this player, Jonathan Kovacevic, over here. Another comment goes out there and says this, Kovy so rarely does bad things, I just don't care to complain about this. He's only 27, the cap is going up, and he fits in ridiculously well. I'm worried that Fitz is now going to move Nemec or Casey for a guy like Shen. Spoiler alert, he didn't. All the blue chip trade pieces are coming off the board, and I worry Fitz is going to get desperate. That's a lot of term and money for a guy who has only really looked great with Siegenthaler. It seems like you have to move Nemo for something big or now that you've blocked him for the foreseeable future. Go get Elias Pettersson or Paterka or something. I don't understand why the Devils signed this Kovacevic contract. They've got 2 young Clue blue liners, young Clue blue chippers. Interesting. Dying to play in the NHL, and as it stands, they have no path. Because option number 1 should be to offload Dougie Hamilton in the offseason. You build a more balanced roster by freeing up his money. So, if long-term you project a Simon Nemec or a Seamus Casey to being near the top, and you have Kovacevic as a middle-ish pair guy, stabilizing everything out, it's honestly looking pretty good. But with that in mind, I want to turn back to the original question here. Do the Montreal Canadiens regret this? Is this a mistake that Kent Hughes made? Was it under-evaluating a prospect or a player that they had and the true value behind his profile? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below whether or not Kent Hughes may regret this, and what your thoughts are on Kovacevic if you're a Devils and or a Habs fan. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.